Hello, and welcome to Autology, the weekly podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. This week's episode is called Tesla Cyber Rodeo Event, New 4680 Battery Cells. And you're here with me, Yanina Mills. We have Jay Huang, S&P Global Mobility, Supply Chain and Technology Senior Research Analyst covering the North American battery market, alongside Graham Evans, S&P Global Mobility, Supply Chain and Technology Research Director. Hello to you both, and thank you for joining this week's episode of Autology.
Hi, Yana. Thank you for having us.
Thanks. So this week's podcast is about Tesla's recent Cyber Rodeo event held at the company's Gigafactory in Texas. So the first question that I have is pretty basic. What's the news? What are the battery news revealed at the Cyber Rodeo event?
Yeah, so biggest battery news related to this event was Tesla's new 4680 battery cell manufacturing video, which was shown at the presentation. So Giga Texas is a highly automated facility. So it's called the machine that builds a machine, and the battery manufacturing facility is a key part of that. So according to the video, they put various materials into this huge battery manufacturing facility, and 4680 battery cells come out without any human interventions, which is really cool. And structural battery pack that contains new 4680 battery cells is another disclosure that was officially disclosed and displayed at the event. So conceptually, both are not new. So both 4680 cells and structural battery pack were already introduced on Tesla's Battery Day back in 2020. But Cyber Rodeo event was the first time that Tesla demonstrated and mass-produced this new type of battery.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jay. Maybe I'll add from that as well. Obviously, the battery tech bit is the bit that I think we're most excited about, but I think probably worth saying is the fact that more generally, this event marked the launch of Giga Texas as both a vehicle and soon-to-be battery manufacturing facility. So obviously, this is Tesla in the US extending their footprint away from California. The head office of the global headquarters of Tesla is moving to Texas in the process. And we say amongst all of the marketing and all of the glitz and glamour of the event, I think a few fairly highly significant claims from Elon Musk in the presentation. This will be the world's biggest automotive factory. He made the point that it's going to be 3 times as big as the Pentagon, amongst a number of other analogies. Also the biggest battery factory. I think probably from the manufacturing perspective, one of the most interesting things as well is that this is all under one roof. Just visually from the either the videos we've seen or the press shots, this is a huge factory all under one roof. So obviously the objective here in terms of optimizing logistics, in terms of increasing scale, in order to secure their own in-house supply chain of batteries. All of this is part of the decision to go for such a large footprint of factory, and indeed in one of the cutouts of the factory, the space for expansion that was identified is pretty significant. So, in the short term, not all of that is going to be used for production, but at the same time, it gives them the opportunity to grow and to achieve the level of scale that they want to achieve. And scale is a term I think we'll use several times.
So what is the 4680 cylindrical battery cell, and why is it so critical for Tesla's future?
Yep, it's a great question. And this is critical because 4680 battery cells are higher performance battery cells with about 14% higher energy density versus the previous version. So that means a longer range electric vehicle with the same space will be possible with this new type of battery. So that's also translated into cheaper vehicle price for consumers, as well as higher margins for companies. So let's look into the definition of 4680 and why it's called 4680. So the 4680 cell means a battery cell with 46 millimeters of diameter by 80 millimeters height. So the previous version was 2170, which Tesla uses right now. And since it has 21 millimeter diameter by 70 millimeters height cell, So for your easy reference, AA batteries at home have about 14.5 by 50.5 millimeter. So 4680 cell have about 4 times wider diameter and 1.5 times longer height than AA batteries that we generally use. And moving on to the performance improvement of 4680 cell, Tesla brags about 5 times energy capacity from the previous 2170 cells. But what they don't tell you about is that the number of cells also go down about 1/5. So, for example, Tesla Model Y with 250 miles range, it now requires about 4,400 of cells of the previous version, while the new 4680 battery will require only about 950 cells. So net, we should look into the increase of energy density, which measures the increased amount of batteries energy capacity per same weight or volume. So that's the right metric to use. And according to Tesla's Battery Day presentation in 2020, transitioning from 2170 to 4680 together with the new cell designs will be able to increase the energy density by 14% and decrease the cost per kilowatt hour by 16%.
I think these are huge improvements, and I think it's a big milestone, not just for Tesla, but also for the cylindrical cell format. You know, that they are pushing these numbers, that they're achieving these figures. I think probably again a little bit of context, perhaps, you know, to say so cylindrical cells obviously being one of 3 typical formats being used for electric vehicle batteries. So cylindrical, pouch, and prismatic make up the majority of the market. And worth it to say, you know, cylindrical cells are more abundant in terms of their sheer quantity. You know, if we take a couple of examples, you know, Tesla Model 3, the kind of entry level 55 kilowatt hour battery that's been on sale for a while contains 2,976 cylindrical cells. Compare that to the Volkswagen ID3, 62 kilowatt hour entry level vehicle with 216 cells, because these are prismatic, so bigger cells in terms of physical size, and therefore less of them in a battery pack that is roughly the same size, positioned in the same area of the vehicle. So we think about what that means in terms of market context, though, and think about the S&P Global Mobility forecasts here around battery cell technology that we maintain. You know, prismatic cells are the technology of choice for the market. We expect that about 58% of cells used in light passenger vehicle applications by 2025 will be prismatic. So that's about 819 gigawatt hours of capacity in prismatic cells. By comparison, cylindrical cells, 153 gigawatt hours, about 11% of the market by 2025. So Tesla, and by virtue Tesla themselves, and also their joint venture partnership with Panasonic, is going to make up a fair chunk of that 11% of the market. And they are perhaps fairly unique in the fact that they have continued to pursue the cylindrical cell format against options such as prismatic, which in principle will give the opportunity to give a higher energy density. But certainly these are exciting improvements for the cylindrical cell technology that Tesla have managed to achieve with 4680.
So 4680 doesn't exactly sound like rocket science since it's a bigger battery, but it took several years for Tesla until now. And Tier 1 battery cell makers are still working on 4680 productions to begin within a year or two. So why is 4680 so challenging?
Yep, that's another great question. And Tesla 4680 cell production has been challenging because it aims to solve major bottlenecks in battery manufacturing through difficult process innovations such as tablet cell design and dry process. So I'll go one by one. So tablet cell design removes taps or terminals of battery, which are the positive and negative connector attached to the battery. So as a result, less heat and less energy loss are achieved from shorter electrical paths, which results in energy efficient and thermally stable battery cell. And also, battery tap manufacturing process requires laser welding of aluminum can, which is one of the key culprits of battery cell defects. So eliminating the tap also removes a potential source of a manufacturing defect, as there's no need to weld any components together. So that's the benefit of going to tabless cell design. And dry process is another process innovation that Tesla is pursuing right now. And the biggest bottleneck for the speed of battery cell manufacturing is caused by wet process. And Tesla wants to replace it with dry process. So what do I mean by that? So cathode materials need to be mixed with liquid solvents, and this slurry needs to be coated into the substrate. And then they should be dried to evaporate wet solvents and be pressured, which is called the calendaring process. And the most capital intensive, time and space and energy consuming process is this drying part of the battery manufacturing, since it generally takes more than 12 hours to completely evaporate liquids. And Tesla wants to remove this bottleneck by adopting dry coated electrodes. So according to Tesla, they estimate about 10 times footprint reduction and energy reduction if they successfully implement this dry process. So to be clear, at this point, we have little information about how many of these improvements are actually implemented at Giga Texas production. But so far, Tesla is leading in manufacturing process innovations, while other tier 1 battery makers target this year or next year for 4680 mass production.
Yeah, I think the detail there is really interesting, Jay. I mean, we actually here in the UK, we recently had the opportunity to go visit the UK Battery Industrialization Centre in the Midlands here, and one of the big things that was evident there, it's effectively like a small scale gigafactory that they have there, and they're using that to develop new technologies, and this drying process really is quite interesting to see in reality, because we have this vision of a fast-paced manufacturing production line where parts are moving around very quickly and vehicles are coming off production lines very quickly. And yet we have this process whereby in order to produce the batteries, we have to have them dry for circa 12 hours in some kind of controlled process, in some kind of, carefully managed environment with no moisture. So this element of the manufacturing process, to speed that up somehow, or to at least have the physical space to do it at such large scale, this is really the key challenge, and one of the main things that I think they're looking to overcome with 4680. Not just, so obviously there's two things you can do here, right? You can improve the manufacturing production line, or you can change the tech you're trying to produce in order to do it in a faster manner. And I would say for Tesla, 4680 is their attempt to achieve this, and therefore be able to deliver batteries and therefore electric vehicles in larger quantities in a given space, in a given time.
That's very interesting. So what is the structural battery pack that contains 4680 cells, and why does it matter?
So structural battery pack integrated with vehicle will enhance about 14% driving range according to Tesla, and that's the reason why it matters. And Tesla structural battery pack is designed to be a structurally integrated element of the vehicle, which reduces lots of excess parts and spaces of conventional modular battery packs. So traditional vehicle design has a top-down approach on battery. So a certain amount of space is designated for battery pack, which accommodates battery modules. And then inside the modules, there's going to be battery cells. So we call it cell module pack configuration. However, structural battery pack aims to skip all the intermediate steps, such as modules, and integrate everything at a vehicle level, which is why it's called cell-to-vehicle configuration. So as a result, structural battery pack is formed by the front and rear metal pieces surrounding the battery cells, which means ideally no clear boundary between battery pack and vehicle. So Tesla touts this process will cut about half the size of the manufacturing line that assembles the battery packs and the chassis versus conventional cell module pack configuration. So at the end of the day, in vehicle level, it will simplify components and processes. So Tesla previously said that cell vehicle integration alone will provide about 14% range increase.
That's a great outline, Jay. I mean, maybe just a couple of things that I'll add. And I mean, obviously, on one hand, there, Jay's outlined the fact that we want to use this opportunity to cut the size of the manufacturing line, and I would say all of this is in the process of improving the speed of manufacture and the scale. I think probably one of the things to say is around the vehicle architecture advantages of electric vehicles. Obviously, everyone's familiar now with the idea that the battery goes under the floor there, and naturally, in order to improve the range of electric vehicles, we want to improve the energy density. So at that point that we've made a successful electric vehicle battery, we're going to analyze it and study it and say, okay, what can we strip out in terms of weight or in terms of content, or in order to improve the energy density of it. The metric of specific energy, watt hours per unit kilogram, per unit of weight is a key metric for the OEMs. So lots of people doing the same thing in this sense. Lots of other OEMs considering the structural battery pack in order to improve specific energy. The BYD battery, the Blade battery, is another good example, using a different chemistry, different cell technology. Other configurations being considered for space optimization as well. We had lots of discussions with clients around this. The idea of cell to body, the idea of cutting out the pack itself, the idea that the cells will be installed almost literally into the vehicle, connected up and installed into the floor of the vehicle, I think is another option that's being considered. But the idea that this battery pack is the structural member in the floor, of course, is a key consideration for things like crash. The other big one here, I would say, to consider that we've spent a lot of time looking at is the cooling requirements. As things stand, the vast majority of electric vehicle batteries at the moment are coolant cooled, regardless of their configuration. So this is about 75% of electric vehicles on the market now are coolant cooled. We expect this to increase to 90% by 2025. So some electric vehicles at the moment that are air cooled, we expect will transition to, or more of the market will adopt coolant cooling. So how you lay this pack out, how you ensure the coolant cooling can be effective when you've crammed in more battery cells and you've done away with some of the let's call it the battery furniture associated with the module. How you ensure acceptable cooling performance is critical, and that's why we see manufacturers looking at some of these more optimistic or more forward-looking cooling technologies like immersion cooling or phase change materials that can support this requirement.
Interesting. So when can we see Tesla EVs with all these new battery technologies revealed at the event?
So the 4680 cells were already mass produced and equipped inside the Tesla Model Ys. So Tesla Model Y standard range was the first model containing new 4680 cells produced at Giga Texas. According to news articles published around Cyber Rodeo event, the first vehicle model that Tesla produced with all this type of new battery technology, the new 4680 high nickel battery cells with structural pack, is the Tesla Model Y standard range model with only about 279 miles range under $60,000 price tag. So it's only available for small volume to Tesla employees right now. So it's hard to know all the details at this moment, but it's an interesting move that Tesla chose to prioritize a standard range model over long range with new type of battery cells. So we do not know when Tesla will release long range model with 4680 cells, but maybe it's an indication that how tight the battery cell supply is right now. So these days, the rate determining step for vehicle production exists in key components such as battery and semiconductor, not so much in vehicle manufacturing itself. So imagine if you're OEM maker and have limited amount of battery cells, it's highly likely that you want to maximize revenue and profit by maximizing the number of vehicles produced by making the smallest battery capacity possible. So this move will increase the number of vehicles to be sold. So if you look at the demand side of the equation, electric vehicle demand is still strong. So Elon Musk tweeted on battery supply shortage a year ago, said the demand is no problem, but near-term cell supply makes it hard to scale Tesla semi-truck, then this limitation will be less onerous next year, which means 2022. So now a year has passed since then, and contrary to what Elon Musk said, the situation became more onerous, not less. So the longer than expected battery supply shortage may be one of the rationales behind why Tesla's strategic move toward prioritizing smaller battery packs and standard range models. But we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, could you share your thoughts on maybe what Tesla's battery strategy is?
So Tesla has two-track strategy on battery. So one part of their strategy is a high nickel cylindrical battery, such as 4680 cells that's just revealed for the higher end models, and LFP, the lithium iron phosphate prismatic battery, which has low cost and low driving range for entry models like Tesla Model 3 standard range. So the battery market right now is very segmented, but Tesla thinks is okay with just two types of batteries. So Elon Musk once said that we're the Baskin Robbins of battery situation, where there are so many formats and so many chemistries from so many OEMs. So he sees that just one nickel chemistry and one iron chemistry, which is LFP, can troubleshoot so many different customer needs.
I think this is a really good point in terms of adding to complexity by having more configurations and yet aligning on a few that will deliver the needs. And again, I think this is all in the pursuit of achieving scale, but also I guess democratizing EVs as well. The fact that of course at the moment EVs remain very expensive, and obviously we want to bring down the cost, we want to optimize the cost, and of course with that drive high margin and deliver profitable vehicles. So I think that what Tesla has to do in as it plans its battery strategy is consider the future product strategy and also maintaining the premium nature of the brand. The fascinating statistic that came out of it for me, the Cyber Rodeo, is the fact Musk stated there that around 1% of Tesla's vehicle production is 1% of global vehicle production. He stated that they want to get to 20%. So the idea that 20% of all vehicles on the planet produced annually are Teslas. I mean, if I take the S&P Global Mobility forecast for 2030, where we see around 100 million vehicles produced annually, right? That's 20 million cars a year. So the idea that Tesla would make 20 million cars a year seems fanciful at the moment. Of course, a quick calculation, if you assume that that's every vehicle has an average of 70 kilowatt hour battery pack, that's 1.4 terawatt hours of batteries required just to produce Teslas. I mean, this is an astonishing claim. It's a big aspiration, but in terms of what would be considered or what would be required in terms of batteries, in terms of raw materials, in terms of chemistries to achieve that, is a thought. And I think that their battery strategy is heading in the direction of as Jay outlines, perhaps a lower cost option for the lower segment vehicles, and then a more premium chemistry, higher range, higher energy density for the higher price vehicles.
Perfect. And just before we wrap up today's episode, it would be interesting to know, now that Tesla has become a leading battery maker in 4680, what are the most important factors for battery makers to become a winner in the battery market?
Yep. So Graham previously highlighted scale as an important factor, which I completely agree with. So I will mention economies of scale as a first thing, and battery raw materials. And economies of scale, let's remind ourselves that why Tesla chose cylindrical battery cell at the beginning. So Tesla wants to dominate the whole supply chain, just like Apple did in smartphone market, or at least they do not want to be intimidated by all the supply disruptions or the suppliers at all. So ultimately, they want to have an absolute bargaining power towards suppliers. And the prismatic and pouch may have technical advantages with higher energy density, but Tesla chose cylindrical cell because it was a widely available commodity at this point, and much better positioned to achieve more economies of scale and bargaining power. So Tesla is wise enough to double down on cylindrical to achieve more economies of scale by building gigafactories in the world. But at the same time, they're prepared for another popular form factor, such as cheaper LFP prismatic cells, which is dominant in China, to deal with diversified vehicle demands. So that's about the economies of scale. And if we touch on battery raw materials, which is a really hot issue these days, and any battery makers and OEMs who can have bargaining power in battery materials will be at a huge advantage. So according to our battery raw material price analysis published in March this year, nickel price was up 36%, cobalt was up 125%, and lithium up about 750% between January 21 to 22. So this year, battery metal prices have become more volatile than last year. So not to mention the nickel price saga that hiked the nickel price by 4 times at peak. So it went up from $20,000 per ton at the beginning of 2022 and to $100,000 per ton at March peak, and then down around $40,000 per ton these days. And according to S&P commodity price data, lithium hydroxide, which is a raw material for lithium, is priced in North Asia, went up about 160% year to date as of April 18th. So that's about what's happening in battery metal prices. And the volatility in battery raw material prices is a key factor because it will significantly disrupt all the existing roadmaps of electric vehicle production and battery cell prices. And Tesla wants to dominate the whole supply chain, especially in the upstream as well. So Tesla might be in the lithium mining and refining business, according to Elon Musk's recent tweet. And Tesla also signed multiple contracts to secure battery metals, and US big 3 OEMs and global OEMs are doing the same. And that's what's happening in the supply side of the equation. And if you're moving on to the demand side of the equation, electric vehicle demand is still there. So one of the key rate determining steps of vehicle production, again, is a battery, especially more so in battery upstream going forward. But I'm still optimistic about the long-term electric vehicle demand because the reason, number one, battery technology is being developed at a rapid pace, just like we all saw at Cyber Rodeo event. And therefore, technology will be able to address most of the issues that we're going through right now. And the reason number two, in commodity market, and I guess any financial markets, I think, there's a saying that the cure for high price is a high price itself. And most of battery metals are commodities. They're not just precious metal. So the supply is not too constrained in the long term, and more mining projects will come out at the end of the day. So if you recall, Econ 101, high price will bring more suppliers, which will result in balanced supply and demand and price equilibrium in the long run. To long story short, to summarize, I see significant challenges from battery upstream in the short term, but I'm pretty optimistic about long-term electric vehicle and battery volume growth.
Thanks, Jay. I don't personally have too much more to add to that. Building on the points that you mentioned. I mean, I think that we do remain on somewhat shaky ground here in terms of raw material availability. I think that there is concern, of course, in the industry that the whole electric vehicle future is reliant on some of these critical raw materials, and we're kind of in uncharted territory here. I think you made a good distinction between commodity materials and precious metals. I mean, the price of a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle doesn't go up or down based on based on the price of palladium or platinum or rhodium that goes into the catalytic converter. And yet we've seen the case that the list price of electric vehicles such as Rivian and Tesla have gone up on the basis of changes in these commodity prices. So it feels a much more volatile situation that consumers will have to, or consumers are being expected to suck up somewhat. So I think this is a new, this is very much new territory really, and abundant availability of these commodities at fairly consistent prices is hopefully going to allow the OEMs the ability to plan their business accordingly. I think on the battery front, safety should remain critical. We have to remember that for the vast majority of consumers, the electric vehicle industry remains at a nascent stage. Some consumers are more concerned about this. There's plenty of videos out there on YouTube showing electric vehicle thermal incidents, shall we say, that naturally will even if they are in the minority, they are something that can cause concern amongst consumers. So therefore, safety is and should remain critical. And I think degradation as well. Some of the early electric vehicles that if you were to go purchase one second hand that's maybe 6 or 7 years old, maybe that range was advertised as 200 kilometers. Probably after 6, 7, 8 years, you're not going to see close to 200 kilometers now. So there's that element of degradation in the battery that consumers are concerned about, and of course, longevity of that battery over the lifetime of the vehicle is important to ensure, so that people are not concerned about the value of their investment, let's say. And that's before we even touch upon real world range and the charging performance. So of course, the idea that the range will be exactly as that, WLTP cycle rated range where the AC was off and the driver was driving the vehicle in a very sedate manner. Of course, in the real world, the range is somewhat lower, and improvements in range are going to dictate whether these vehicles can be used by a greater swathe of the population or not. And then charging, there is this trade-off in terms of battery chemistry in order to deliver energy density, charging performance, durability. It's not it remains a trade-off, right? It's a kind of spider diagram of pros and cons. There's not one technology that ticks all these boxes quite yet. And we'll probably finish by saying, we can't talk about batteries on a podcast without mentioning solid state technology. I think what we have to say from Cyber Rodeo is that on the part of Tesla, this is a huge long-term commitment to a non-solid state technology in terms of both the manufacturing techniques and technology. Of course, there is some adaptability in the manufacturing process, and different technologies are adaptable. But what we would have to say is that from what we've seen in Cyber Rodeo, this is a long-term commitment to non-solid state technology. So it's been deemed as not being worth the risk yet by Tesla, the pioneers in the industry. I think I'll leave it there.
Great. Thank you. And I know this was a pretty unique event, and the landscape obviously continues to change rapidly. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. A big thank you to you both for joining Autology.
Thank you, Jan. Thanks for having us.
Yep. And thank you to all you listeners for tuning in as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our autology@ihsmarket.com email. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit all the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.